Welcome, everybody, to Come Back to Love. I'm Robin Vogel, and we are on Dream Vision 7 Radio. Welcome to our new listeners out there, and welcome to those that return every week to listen to the radio show and the way that we explore our journeys to healing, connection, and transformation in love and relationships. I'm your host, Robin Vogel. I'm a love and intimacy coach and the creator of Heal Your Heart. Join me as I share stories, tools, and insights to help you rewrite your love story, whether it's about overcoming heartbreak, unraveling old patterns, or reigniting the spark in your current relationship. Together, we'll explore how love begins within and expands outward to create meaningful, fulfilling connection with others. You can tune in to Come Back to Love every Thursday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. Listen online on your mobile device, in your car, or simply ask Alexa to play Dream Vision 7. In each episode, I welcome incredible guests who bring their unique perspectives and expertise to help us dive into topics like self-love, compassion, healing childhood wounds, and creating the love we desire and deserve. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by special guest Marisa Sim. So grab a cup of tea, settle in, and join us for this heart-centered transformational conversation. Let's explore how you can come back to love, starting with the relationship that matters the most, the one with yourself. I'm glad you're here and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Robin.
Yes, you're so welcome. Marissa, as I said before we got on here,
Hmm.
I'm so, so grateful to have you. I met you through a summit that you
Hmm.
were doing with the beautiful Shelley. Um, and the focus of the summit was on the mother wound. And a colleague of mine sent it to me, and it drew me in for two reasons. One, because mother wound is part of my history. And
Hmm.
two, to be honest, the energy of what was sent out, and I don't know how to describe that in any other way. Like the materials that I looked at, the graphics, the colors, just the whole energy of it that I felt
Hmm.
when I looked at, is this something that I want to actually devote my time to?
Hmm.
I got a yes because it just felt so warm and loving and like kind.
Mm.
Is so honestly so rare. I mean, I've been doing this work for 20 years and I've been involved in summits like all over the place over such a long period of time. This really
Yeah.
stood out as something very unique. And the obvious thing is that it's because it came through you.
Mm.
So and just being with you now, I can feel, just that heart-centered space. I just felt really drawn in and I actually dedicated time in my schedule to listen live and participate. And then I
Yeah.
immediately knew I wanted to have you on my show.
Yeah, thank you for like noticing that the summit energy and the vibe was really different from other summits. I really want to bring um, a different energy where it's not just like corporate or um, stiff, but I wanted to break the mold actually, even. And thank you for noticing the brand colors because like a friend of mine said, oh, it's too pink. But in my view, it's like I wanted to break the rules of summits and I didn't want it to be sterile. And I was like, no, this is the color that I want to bring to this summit. And yeah, and someone noticed, which is great.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm not the only one who noticed, but yeah, I think you did break the mold of what's typically done, and I really appreciate that.
Mm.
So I didn't read your bio because I really wanted you to share. It's a
Mm.
beautiful summary encapsulating who you are and what you're bringing to the world with such loving intention. And so I wonder if you could introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. So I'm Marissa, and I am a trauma-informed coach. And as well, I'm trained in neuro-linguistic programming and also root cause therapy. And I'm also a mother of two. And I've been doing this. I started off as a holistic health coach, and I was coaching women with their health challenges. And I did that for about 7 years. And while that was really rewarding, I felt like it's hard to notice a pattern within my clients. And there's
Mm.
this relationship with their mothers that was actually causing their health challenges. They were burnt out. They were overgiving. They didn't know how to take care of themselves, right? They didn't know how to make time for themselves. And it's really strange. I think the universe works in a very beautiful way is that I started to realize that I wasn't addressing the root cause of their health issues. I was basically skimming the symptoms, but I really wanted to go deep and to address, the core wound that they have that was actually influencing their health. And that's why 2 years ago, I decided to transition to become a trauma-informed coach because I felt like I'm ready to do this work. And it also has to do with the timing because, after I turned 40, something happened in me, something shifted. I was ready to own my voice, to step out and step out. Yeah, and so here I am today.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Yeah, thank you for
Mm,
sharing that. It's really interesting what you said about working as a health coach and noticing a common underlying theme.
yeah.
Yeah, that's really important. And that absolutely speaks to me and my own personal journey, which I don't have to share that piece right now, but probably will
Mm,
in our conversation today, because that was exactly my experience. I was having health issues like in my 30s,
mm-hmm.
in my early 30s. And it's pretty
Mm,
young to start having some health issues.
yeah.
And it was absolutely tied to a wound from my childhood
Mm,
that had to do with my mother.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
So it sounds like you had that experience, you started to notice something in common, and of course you were aware of your own experience,
of course, yeah.
because like you said, the universe works in beautiful ways, being a mirror for you, most likely, for all of
Yeah.
us. And then you made a big shift to doing some pretty deep work with people. Like trauma
Yeah.
work around the mother is probably the deepest work we can do, I think.
Yeah. It's
Sometimes.
honestly like all women were daughters before they came, right? Like you don't have to be a mother, but we all came from our mothers. And so that wound is such a core part of our identity, as children, right? It really depends on whether we had a secure attachment to our mothers or an insecure attachment, and that's how we show up in the world, right? Of course, I'm not trying to neglect the dads but the mother is usually, right?
Yes,
Yeah, the core energy of the family unit.
absolutely.
Yeah.
How could it not be? We came
Mm-hmm.
inside their bodies, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So what specifically were you noticing? I mean, we're using the term mother wound. It's a term that people are, I think, just starting to identify with. Uh,
Yeah.
in the field of psychology in the last 20 years or more. Of course, we're always looking, and I was doing my own healing on my mother, but the sort of term mother wound feels like it's new and it's got some new definition and identity with it. So I wonder if you could share that with our listeners.
Yeah, I think it's to be honest, I think I mean the relationship between our mothers and how it affects our psyche has been around for quite a while. But you are right that the term mother wound is actually pretty new. Um, and I have to give credit where credit is due, right? So like or the books I read, especially Kelly McDonald's book on mother hunger, right? That's for the first
Yes.
time I actually read the term mother wound. Yeah. And that gave me so many insights around my own my own wound with my mother. And basically the mother wound is, it's an emotional and psychological pain that comes from our relationship with our mother. And in the I would say bro on a broader term, it's a collective women's wound, right? So, women who have been living in a patriarchal society have been suppressed and, have been kept small, have been, controlled. And obviously that, infiltrates into the home, right? Into the women who have come before us. So it's not just our mothers, but the generations before. And it's actually a generational trauma that we're talking about, the mother wound. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate you saying that, talking about the collective. It just,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, really feels right to me.
Yeah, and right now there's definitely a big shift. We're the women are we're tired. We're tired of being ruled by, the patriarchy. We're tired of all the rules that have been set on us, and we're at this point, I think it's like a huge pivotal shift in our collective that we're now coming together. Our eyes are opening up, our consciousness and awareness around this is opening up. So that's why, the mother wound is now more prominent. It has always been there, but maybe it wasn't ready for us to receive it.
Hmm.
Mm,
Right. Yes,
yeah.
exactly. And it really helps to identify and be able to self-identify. So just to get even deeper with that, like if you've experienced neglect or abuse, of course,
Yes.
or like in the case of my family, my mother was ill for 4 years when I was really young. When I was 6 years old, she was
Yeah.
diagnosed with breast cancer,
Yeah.
metastatic breast cancer, and she was sick for 4 years before she died. And so,
Mm,
for me, it was a combination of her actual depression before she got sick,
yeah.
and then the dynamics that ensued just being with someone who was afraid, not feeling well, you know,
Yeah.
off to treatments, but also not handling it well. Not that there's any good way to handle that. I mean, like, I have absolutely no judgment around that. I can't
Yeah.
even imagine what that was like, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
And I think there are some people that I've witnessed that have handled things maybe more gracefully or more, so it was sort of this, for me, this combination of things. But if you've just had a mother who like was depressed, for example, a lot of people will say,
Mm,
oh, this happened and my mother stayed in bed for 6 months. It's like, there's so many places where, I guess, so many different situations where that wound starts to fester. What do you want to add to that as the expert?
yeah. So my mother went through a deep depression in her 40s, and I think it's probably got to do with, perimenopause and menopause.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
right. So like she didn't know how to, and we didn't know as well, how to handle her. She was just explosive one day and then she would be low in energy another day. Like so the as children, I guess for in my case, I was like, how can I help my mom feel better? Because
Yeah.
I could see her suffering, right? So I was like, I took it upon myself to become the savior, to fix her.
As if you,
And yeah, so and like if I fix her, then mom will be okay, then I will be okay. So that was that was what's happening in my head at that time, right?
yes.
So yeah, you're true. You're right in terms of there are many different layers in how the mother wound shows up. In not, and when we talk about childhood wounds, we're talking about up to 18 years old. We're not talking about, just early childhood. Obviously, early childhood is the formative years of the brain development, but throughout your 18 years of your life, the way your mother showed up for you, how she reacted, that also affects you yeah, in your wound, in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank
Hmm.
you. What's coming to mind is a question around how it impacts our sons. I feel like a lot of this work has been, I mean, we were just talking about the patriarchy and women and the collective wound in women. or in people that identify as female.
Mm.
But what about, let's just take a moment to talk about like what about the sons that experienced a mother wound in the ways we've described?
Yeah, I think well, it's a good point. When we talk about the sons who have the mother wound, um, we can think about it in the way they relate to women, right? So if they didn't have, again, secure attachment with the mothers or insecure attachment with mothers, they either trust women or they distrust women,
Mm,
right? So if they didn't have the right, if they have an insecure attachment with their mother, then they wouldn't be able to trust the women in their lives.
right.
And that's why you see men, going through relationships, not committing, avoiding commitment, and just not being able to fully trust their heart
Hmm.
with someone else
Hmm.
because it's too painful. It's too much for them as a child, as a young boy,
Right.
and not wanting to experience that even in adulthood. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Mhm.
it shows up in a similar way, which makes sense.
Yes.
But that
Yeah.
piece around treating women, which also obviously shows up in women as well, like how they treat their female partners or their friends or, their sisters. Like it's all,
100%. Yeah, exactly.
yeah. Before we take a commercial break, I have to pull this out. I'm just sitting here. I know most people are listening and not necessarily watching. And I know there's some people that will be watching. But I happen to be have this book right in front of me, and it's Hope Edelman's. This one is Motherless Mothers.
Hmm.
But for me, she was like the first one to introduce me to the mother wound. She didn't use
Yeah.
that language. It was a long time ago, and she wrote a
Yeah.
book called Motherless Daughters,
Hmm.
which at the time for me was so, so profound. Even to purchase the book and hold it in my hands, I was shaking.
Yeah.
To open it up and read the pages, I could barely get through a page or two or three without like such intense feeling that it was hard to handle. And
Yeah.
then one day she was actually giving a book reading in Manhattan. I'm in Boston.
Hmm.
And I got a ticket, which felt like such a courageous act because
Yeah.
I hadn't done really much healing. I hadn't found my voice around this piece. I
Mm.
remember going to Manhattan and just feeling so anxious to be in that same room with her. And I went to that event by myself, and it was like, oh my God, it was so intense for me. She
Yeah.
really, really impacted in a very significant way for
Mm.
me, my own healing journey around my mother and the mother,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
so profoundly.
Hmm.
Yeah. All right. I think we're going to take a commercial break and come
Mm.
right back to this incredible conversation. And we'll be right back.
Okay.
Welcome back to Come Back to Love Radio. We're on Dream Vision 7, and today we have special guest Marisa Sim, and we are talking about um, a very deep topic, the mother wound. And if you're listening and you self-identify with this topic of having a wound in your childhood, like you said, birth to age 18, I would say womb to age 18 because I
Hmm.
think about
Yeah.
what happens when you're in the womb. Um, if you've had an insecure attachment with your mom or some trauma, abuse, etc., neglect with your mom, you're in the right place today. Because, first of all, Marisa is an expert at this topic. She has completely committed and devoted her life's work to healing not only herself, but those that come into contact with you and work with you.
Hmm.
And I would love to dive into like, okay, now what? Like what are the steps? What are these initial steps? Um, what do you do once you figure this out? Like,
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I think cultivating awareness.
hmm,
So for me, it's like you need to train yourself to be able to respond instead of react. And
Mm.
that's part of the healing journey, like, because you're going to experience triggers a
Yeah.
lot,
Yes.
right? And the thing is, if you don't heal the parts of you that need to be healed, then you will explode when a trigger happens, or you will react in an unkind way. And when you do that, there will be obviously some kind of consequences that you have to deal with, right? So I would say the first thing that I always um, encourage my clients is to really cultivate awareness, right? And that could be in many different ways. It could be mindfulness exercise, it could be breath work, really um, pay attention to your thoughts, pay attention to how you speak to yourself
Mm.
and to others, but firstly yourself. Because, when you have the mother wound, um, you're bound to be unkind, because you don't have a strong sense of self. You have a lot of self-doubt. You need a lot of validation from other people. So it's really about trusting that voice of yours, building that intuition, and that's where the awareness parts come in. And second thing I would encourage people to do is to practice, boundaries. Practice saying no,
Mm.
right? And it may seem easy, but it's a process.
It's not.
It's not. Yeah, it's a process, right? So I would say like be kind to yourself. When someone is, it can be, you can start, I would say you can start in very small ways. Maybe it's like when someone texts you, right? And so you're like, oh, are you available to do this extra work for me, whatever. You could say, actually, thanks for thinking about me, but I already have plans and I cannot take on this extra work. It's small little steps that you can take to build up to saying no to someone in the face, but obviously in a kind way, not like, being mean or anything.
Yeah.
But setting boundaries is part of the work. And it takes time. So don't be hard on yourself.
Yeah. Setting boundaries is a really big topic that I would love to talk about for a moment
Yeah.
and then go back to the awareness piece. But
Mhm.
so in my work, I bring in a lot of tantra informed practices
Yes.
work, and consent and boundaries and saying yes and saying no is massive. And of course, it's
Yes.
massive anyway in general because, hey, why did I get sick in my 30s? Like you said in the very beginning of this conversation, I personally was overworking, overdoing, overplaying, not paying attention to my body, not treating myself well,
Mm.
not caring, not loving for myself as well as I absolutely not as well as I do now.
Mm.
And I got sick.
Yeah.
So that's an example, just to be really clear about it. Like that's an example of not choosing and not being able to say no.
Yeah.
And yeah, to be extreme, like maybe not even knowing that it's okay to say no, because I think a lot of people don't know that it's okay to say no. And
Yeah.
also depending on what culture you grew up in, like in some cultures, no is just totally not okay to say, like period, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Listeners from all around the world here, so I am
Mm.
inviting people to even think in this moment, like what was it like in the broad culture you grew up in, and what was it like in your family? Like your family culture
Yes.
might not be okay to say no. And it's really not a small thing. For me,
No.
it created something pretty significant that took me many, many years to recover from.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true. Like culturally, I'm from Singapore and I'm Chinese, and the family unit is very important, and the elders are like respected.
Mm.
And there's this thing that we have called filial piety is to take care of your parents, to, respect your parents. But, it's good. It's good that we have that, but it's also like we also need to question, is the person worthy of respect? Or is, it's our culture forcing us to do something that we don't want to do? And it's all about like unlearning things that we're used to, right? And relearning new ways of doing things. Part of um, the difficulty of setting boundaries is the fear of rejection, right? We are
Mhm.
so,
That's right.
we're so afraid of being rejected,
Mhm.
right? Within our community, within our family unit, that it's hard for us to say no. But, and my experience is, at some point, right, it's your health, it's your mental health that is at stake. And you have to be the one that protect yourself, that love yourself unconditionally, right? That um take care of your body, of your mental health. I mean, who there's no one else is going to do that work for you. And if you don't set boundaries with other people and your energy is leaking everywhere, you're gonna feel depleted, you're gonna get sick,
Yeah.
all hold, it's like this, like
Yeah.
from your experience, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to feel also taken advantage of. You're going to feel overwhelmed. You're going to feel angry. You're going to
Hmm.
feel possibly depressed. You're going to feel, you could be feeling anxious. Like these are all the things that, and more that indicate that you're saying yes way too often.
Yeah,
And you really put your finger on it, and I'll take it one step further, that we say yes because we want to be loved. And we don't say no because we don't want love taken away from us. Because most of us with mother wounds have had a felt experience or an embodied experience of love being removed, right?
yeah,
The insecure attachment that you mentioned. And
yeah,
so the parts of ourselves inside like don't want to experience that ever, ever, ever again.
yes,
And so we'll do whatever it takes not to have that repeated experience because it's so painful.
it is. Yeah.
So we're just like, yes, yes, yes. And, love me, love me, love me.
Mm,
Oh gosh. And yes, our mental health and our physical health. For me, it
yeah,
was really impacting my hormones, and my hormones were way out of balance. And it created deep fatigue that lasted a really long time, early menopause, which was sort of confounding for everybody, myself included, because I was so young.
yeah.
And yeah. So those of you that are young listening to today's episode, I really encourage you to really look at that piece.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. Mhm.
Yeah, asking the question like, what are the things you do on a daily basis to ensure that you're loved? Oof, that's a kind of big
Oof.
question. Yeah,
Oh,
so
got
many
chills.
things.
I've got chills.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
big question. It can be really hard to see. We have a hard
Mhm.
time seeing ourselves. We see other people more clearly often. And but when we really take a moment to, I mean, there's probably 1,000 things, I might do the dishes because I want, my partner to love me, or, it can be big and small things. But it's
Yeah. I think there's one other thing I like to bring up is if you are afraid of asking for help, that's usually an indication that, you know, um, you need to set boundaries with other people. And because, if you're afraid of asking for help, you're afraid to be vulnerable, right? And you're taking on way too much than you actually physically can. And I'm telling you this because I experienced that in my life,
yeah.
where I was like hyper independent. I never want to ask for help. I'll sort things out myself because my mom wasn't there to do anything for me. Like I had to like deal with stuff, right? And so, you know, and there was one day that it was really early on when my son was born, and I was feeling super resentful. And my husband was like, "What's going on? I can tell that you're angry. You're passive aggressive. What's going on?"
Mm,
And I was like, I'm doing everything. I'm doing, the housework and the child caring, and I have to work and stuff like. And he just plainly said like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. Take a breath. You know that you can ask for help, right? You know that you can ask me to help you with this, right?" And I was like, it was like a light bulb in my
Mhm.
head. I was like, holy shit, sorry, shit. But I can
Say shit on
actually,
the radio. Yeah.
I'm like, I
Yeah.
can actually ask for help. Like, wow. Like I never, it wasn't even in my language, right? To be able to um be vulnerable and say, hey, I actually need your support more than actually I think that I need. But yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
that's the my journey about asking for help.
Yeah, that's great. I love that story. Because to him, it was so obvious. Like, ask for help.
Yes.
And you're like, what? I can
What?
ask for help?
Exactly.
Light bulb. It's really
Yeah.
true. I am sure there's plenty of listeners, and I've had to learn it myself, um,
Mm,
that because when we grow up with a mother wound, we do learn to do things for ourselves because we didn't have that support. So we get very efficient and very resilient, and we have all these parts that get very effective.
hmm.
Sometimes that's the way we adapt
Yeah.
to what happened.
Yeah.
Then we're like, and people then, I don't know if this is your experience, but people definitely look at me and have looked at me over the years as like someone who's, highly functional, doesn't need anything, like self-supporting, etc. And it's like,
Hmm.
oh, actually, I'm human.
Yes.
It's-
Yes.
yeah.
That's the thing. We are human. Like we are human. Like we're
Mhm.
not meant to do this alone.
No, we are really not. And once I learned, I don't know, I'm thinking this might resonate with a listener or 10, um, or more. I hope more. Once I learned to ask, I started asking a lot just to practice. And it certainly is one of the tools that I teach in the Come Back to Love journey is like the repetition of a new pattern to get the brain to reorganize around the new pattern, right? You do
Yeah.
this work as well. You do NLP, which I love. Um,
Yeah.
and And so I just asked a lot, a lot. And some
Mm.
people got triggered by my asking. It's fine. That's about them.
Yes.
But that tells you how much I was asking. And it was so, so healing.
Hmm.
Because what I learned is like people are going to say yes if they want to say yes. I had to trust that. People
Yeah.
were going to say no if they were a no. Totally
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
And I got so much help in so many different ways, especially
Yeah.
during a time that was quite difficult for me.
Mm.
And all the little and big ways that people contributed was just such a gift. And what I
Yeah.
learned is that it wasn't only a gift to me, it was a gift to them.
Yes. Yes. It's a two-way thing, yeah, between you and them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So let's take a deep breath here. This is it's a big topic.
Mm.
Uh, So what are the other things that um, I guess before we take another quick commercial break, what are some of the things that you see that are really helpful to your clients? Like, yes, awareness, of course. I mean, and that's a ever growing, um,
Hmm.
experience of increasing your awareness.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the last thing would be self-compassion.
Mm,
So that was the key thing for me actually,
yeah.
in healing my mother wound is having self-compassion. It's
Mm.
knowing when you mess up, you don't be mean to yourself.
Yeah, good one.
Right? It's like, okay, I mess up. I own it, I messed up. But I'm not gonna like, you know, bully myself anymore into saying that I'm not good enough. You're, who do you think you are, to be this way? Like I stopped talking to myself in unkind ways. But that's where the first thing the first thing about awareness comes in because I was starting to be aware. I was like, whoa, why am I being mean to myself when
Mm.
I mess up? Like, how, I was like, but when I speak to my friend who messes up, I would not say that to her.
Right.
But why was I doing it to myself? And
Right.
that's where the awareness piece comes in, is that once you start to have a level of consciousness, you start to notice these patterns that you're doing, right? You start to notice how you are speaking to yourself, right? And that's how heal so much of myself through the self-compassion. It's such a big piece in my healing journey. I realized that, the I was so kind to everyone else and so warm and so giving and so loving, but I wasn't doing it to myself. I wasn't loving myself the same way that I was doing, loving others, right? And that was the switch. I was like, that's the key switch for me. It's like, wow, you have to also, while you are loving everyone else, you have to first love yourself. And that's the only way I would say heartfelt, authentic love comes from, is that
Mm.
you come from your own self to others and not the other way in. Because I noticed as well, I was like, I'm doing this. Am I doing this because I want something from others? Because I want someone to love me back.
Mm.
Right? I started to make that connection. I was like, okay, so that's not really authentic, if I'm
Right.
honest.
Right. That's right.
Right? It's like, oh, I'm being friendly to everyone else, being kind and everything. But is it because I want something from them?
Right.
But once you start from, loving yourself, having self-compassion, it's a completely different way of seeing things. It's like you become so centered in your sense of self that you can also pick up when you're not truly authentic.
Yes. That beautiful. So well said. So beautiful.
Hmm.
Yeah. Let's take a quick commercial break. I want to come back to just a brief piece around how that actually links to the mother wound. We'll be
Hmm.
right back. Welcome back to the last piece of this beautiful conversation around the mother wound. And
Mm.
you just described so beautifully the experience of not having self-compassion and the negative self-talk. And just talking about it turns the dial up on our listeners' awareness of when they're doing that.
Hmm.
Because that's the biggest piece is like to actually create that witness consciousness where you're able to witness your thoughts rather than just having them and not paying attention to them.
Yeah,
And your description of the self-compassion and how that is like a healing salve for that negative self-talk. So
yeah.
beautiful. And I would just
Mhm.
love to hear just a piece around the link between the negative self-talk and all of that sort of violence towards ourselves and the mother wound. Like, how do those things connect?
Yeah. So I'll just share my experience. It's the easiest.
Great.
So my mom, she was very critical of me. She was, you know, in, she was basically emotionally bullying me. Not just emotionally, but physically as well. But she was always criticizing me, and to do,
Mm,
why am I not doing good, more? Why am I not doing good enough? And obviously, that voice is embedded in my head, right? And that's when I didn't, obviously, when I wasn't conscious that that voice wasn't mine,
mm,
it was my mom's. It wasn't mine to own, but I couldn't, but it was, I wasn't aware of that.
that's
I
right.
wasn't aware that it was actually my mom's voice. It wasn't my own.
Yes.
But once I started healing and started to come back to who I am as a person, know, um, who I was, and we know this. It's like this deep knowing and intuition that happens in our childhood. We actually all have this, but we kind of lost it along the way, right? Because there's too much noise that drowns our
Yes.
inner voice. Yeah, and so that's the piece where, if you've been criticized when you were young and your mom was really angry at you for whatever messing up, then you would treat yourself in the same way. You would have that negative self-talk.
Yeah.
And and if you're not aware of that and you do the same to your children,
Yes.
they will have the negative self-talk,
Yes.
in them. So it's important that we break the cycle. We're now aware that, okay, this negative self-talk is not me.
That's right.
It's my mom's.
That's
It's
right.
probably from her mom, whatever, how many generations ago.
However, further back, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's really, really important. I think that is so important to recognize, and so fits so nicely with the work that we do and come back to that as well, because such an important piece to recognize, like
Yes.
what's us and what's not us. And
Hmm.
yeah, very often and totally often when if you're receiving that from your parents, from your mother,
Yeah.
you take it on as yours. And
Yes.
making that, having that discernment, is
Hmm.
just vital when it comes to
Yeah.
healing. So thank you. I hope that that also brings some awareness to our listeners if they start to think,
Mm.
what are you telling yourself often? What do you tell yourself often? And then ask the question, like the questioning that I do sounds like, well, who does this belong to? Is it mine? And
Yes.
most of the time it was my mother's. And then
Hmm.
just send that energy back and
Hmm.
rewire the brain for something else, for self-compassion and self-love.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we
Yeah.
have many, between the two of us, we have many, many tools to do that.
Yeah.
And any last words, Marissa, how to find you? I know those of you that are looking at a web page will see the link to Marissa's website and her free gift, but share with our listeners that don't have access to that.
Okay, so you can reach me on my website. It's www.marissa, Marisa, sim, sim.com. Or you can, I'm on Instagram as well as marissa.sim, so you can find me there as well. And for your listeners, I would love to present them with my Mother Wound Healing Journal. It's a journal that I came up with that has 10 journaling prompts to help you process the pain in a safe way. Because, it's just you and your journal and you're just writing the thoughts down.
Beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. And because writing has always been a healing it's part of my healing journey. That's why I find it so powerful when you write things down and you not just think about it all the time.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Thanks. So
You're like,
powerful.
yeah, so in that way you get a lot of clarity and insights around your mother wound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. And I know it's beautiful because all of your materials are beautiful and heartfelt. So please do go to marissasim.com. And also, there'll be a link, but you can also download that journal on her webpage as well.
Yes.
Marissa, thank you so much. This was so beautiful for me, and just being with you and the some similar life experience and
Mm.
similar intentions and purpose in the world really touches me. And I know that your work is changing lives like so deeply, and I'm really
Thank you so
grateful.
much.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me. Thank
absolutely.
you.
You're so welcome. All right, we're wishing our listeners a beautiful rest of the day and evening, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.